Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the English with Gemma podcast, where we turn practice into progress. I hope you guys are all doing well this week. I think we have quite an interesting topic, and we are recording a few episodes today, so I'm just going to jump right into it. So, today we're diving into the power of storytelling in language learning. So, when we think about storytelling, it's been an essential part of human connection for centuries, right? It engages our emotions, it helps us to remember things better, and in my opinion, I think it makes learning more enjoyable. So, recently I've just had this idea of how I've been using storytelling to connect with other people and with my students. And I thought it would be cool to look at in more detail about how you, as an ESL learner, can incorporate storytelling into your language learning journey. So, in the first section, I want to talk about why storytelling works. So, yeah, let's dive into a little bit why storytelling is such a powerful tool for learning a language. Research shows that our brains are wired to connect emotionally with stories. When we hear a story, our brain releases these neurotransmitters that enhance memory retention, which I think is super cool. This means that stories can make new vocabulary and grammar structures stick much better in our minds than some other traditional learning methods. So, think about it. When you hear a captivating story, don't you find yourself remembering the details for longer after? Because you kind of internalize that story, especially if it's engaging to you and you remember the details. So, this emotional connection is really key to effective learning, and not just in using storytelling for English learning, but in any way that we learn. If we're not emotionally engaged and captivated and genuinely interested, it's a lot more difficult for that learning method to be effective. So, in addition to this, storytelling introduces context. I always tell my students, when you learn vocabulary or phrasal verbs, you need to learn them in context. You cannot just, separate those words and learn them in long lists. I see a lot of people trying to learn phrasal verbs and memorize them in these big, long lists. And that doesn't work for two different reasons. The first one being that research shows our brains cannot hold on to more than 7 to 10 words at a time. So if you're in a study session or a class and your teacher is trying to teach you more than 10 words, you're not actually going to remember that because your brain physically cannot hold on to it in your short-term memory. And the second reason that that doesn't work is because, like I said before, you are not learning things in context. What I mean by that is you're not seeing how the words are used in real life, and you're also not seeing them in sentences. So it makes it really hard to then reproduce those words in your everyday speech and know how to use them if you don't see how they're actually supposed to be used. So that's why storytelling is really great. It allows you to see vocab in context. And not just vocab, but also grammar structures too. It allows learners to see how the language is used in real life situations. And for example, when you hear a character in a story express emotions or make decisions, you learn not just the words, but also how to use them appropriately, right? All right, before I get into segment 2, I need a sip of water because my throat is so dry and I can hear my voice about to crack. All right. So, in our next section, let's talk about how to actually utilize this method of storytelling. How do we incorporate it into our learning practice? So, I've made a list of a few practical tips of how you can do this. So the first one is to create personal stories. Start by write down some experiences, and use the new vocabulary that you've learned. For example, if you've recently learned vocab for travel, write a short story about a memorable trip or maybe something crazy that happened, like you missed your flight in the airport or something like that. You can describe where you went, what you did, and the people that you met. This personal connection to the story is going to make it more memorable. And then once you've written down a story like that, you can try retelling it either to yourself, to other people. You could record yourself as well. And take that story that you love, whether it's from your own personal experience, maybe it's from a book or a movie, and try and retell it in your own words. So, what I mean is like, summarize and use your own expressions and words as much as possible. And this exercise is going to help you practice different narrative structures. And like I've been saying this whole time, vocab, most of all. Another good tip is if maybe you're a lower level learner and you're not as confident with writing your own story, you could choose a short story or a section of a book that you're already familiar with, and then maybe try to change the ending or, I don't know, add a new character or kind of make it your own. This will spark a lot of creativity and help you practice the language in a more fun way. Again, if you're maybe not as creative or you're struggling to write your own story, you can use prompts. There are loads of online prompts that you can use to storytell. So you can literally Google like short story prompts, writing prompts. And what a prompt is, it's like maybe a sentence or a short idea that helps you get going. So, for example, a prompt might be, I don't know, describe a day you'll never forget, or what would you do if you won the lottery? So those types of prompts can help you start generating ideas and get started. Another fun thing, which is a little bit more tricky to do because you need other people, is starting a story circle or a book club. So, if you have a group of learners, maybe you're a part of an English class, you could consider forming a story circle where each person adds a sentence and you create like a collective story. So, for example, the first person says, like, one day I was walking on the beach. And then the next person continues, when I was on the beach, I found a weird thing. The next person, the weird thing was blah, blah, blah. So that's a really fun, spontaneous speaking exercise and collaboration. Also, if you're an English teacher listening, because I know I have some people that are also teachers that listen, feel free to use that in your classes. When I used to teach group classes, I really liked these kinds of collaborative storytelling exercises. They always go really crazy and people always add really weird ideas, and it's a lot of fun. So, highly recommend doing that. All right, so let's have a look for our final section at some real life statistics that back up the benefits of storytelling. So, of course, it's all well and good to listen to me, but I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, so I will share with you, some actual research on this. So, the first thing is about vocab development. A study by Kern in 2000 found that learners who engaged with stories improved their vocabulary retention by up to 20%, more than those who used traditional memorization methods. Woo, that was a mouthful. Traditional memorization methods. So that just like shows you, right? Like 20% more vocab retention. And what that means, retention means that you're able to retain, you're able to keep the information, the vocabulary in your brain, and then you're able to remember the vocab when you need it, when you're speaking. Another study was about cultural awareness. According to Meyer from a 2009 study, storytelling creates cultural understanding. He stated stories are a bridge to understanding different cultures, allowing students to see the world through various lenses. So, especially when you're reading or listening to stories from others, you can really feel this. Even, like, for example, last night, I was at dinner with some girls in Alicante who are here on Erasmus. And for those of you who don't know, Erasmus is like an exchange program where you go to a new university. It's all within Europe. So, like, if you're a European university student, you go for a semester or even a whole year sometimes to a different country. So two of the girls are from Austria, and then one of them is from Belgium. And I was telling a story last night at dinner about hurricanes in Bermuda. I was explaining the hurricane season, when it happens, what we do. And then I started finding myself explaining like how our houses are built and loads of stuff about Bermudian culture. And they were so interested. They were super engaged. For me, it was really fun to share something about my culture. And I think that's a great example, a recent example of how storytelling really does share a lot of your culture, especially if you're obviously telling a story about your culture or about your own life. Another study that was done by Alderson in 2000 as well is about listening comprehension. They indicated that listening to narratives significantly improved ESL learners' listening comprehension skills. Students that were exposed to stories showed a 30% improvement in comprehension compared to those who did not. So that's really cool. That's another thing that shows that it helps you remember and comprehend a lot better. Another interesting topic is about engagement. So a study from Gao, Gao, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, in 2016 found that storytelling in the classroom, so ESL teachers and learners, listen up, storytelling in the classroom increased student engagement levels by 40%. That's super high, noting that students are more motivated and eager to participate when lessons are framed within a story. And I can totally attest to this. Anytime I incorporated a storytelling mechanism in my classrooms, everyone was excited, everyone was engaged because it's fun. And it's a little bit of a break from the boring grammar or the book, right? Like, who doesn't like to, number one, listen to a story, and number two, tell their own story or create a story together? All right, I've got two more statistics that I think are pretty cool. Brunner in 1991 did a study about critical thinking, and it emphasized the role of narrative in learning, stating that we engage in storytelling to make sense of our experiences, and this critical engagement enhances our cognitive skills. This is cool because if you've listened to my last, or maybe it wasn't my last podcast episode, I think the one before that, I did like 2 episodes about the brain and how the brain and language learning work, and how learning a language actually makes you smarter and makes your memory better. It improves cognitive function. And this is kind of on the same theme, that storytelling increases your ability to think critically and also enhances your cognitive skills, probably memory and recall and all those things like that. If you're interested in neurology, neuroplasticity, and the brain, I am. So if you're interested, I have an episode. I believe it was episode 24. I'm not sure, but if you scroll down on Spotify, you will see an episode that's called How Learning a Language is Changing Your Brain Structure. And it is a super cool episode, in my humble opinion. So be sure to check that out. All right, my last statistic is about emotional impact. Research by Zarzikia, I think they might be Russian, Zarzikia. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right. Zarzikia et al. In 2019 highlighted that emotional storytelling enhances Aha, this is what I was just talking about. It enhances memory retention, and they conclude that emotionally charged narratives, which means stories that are emotional, can lead to a 50% increase in retention rates among language learners. So, this is actually increasing your memory and your ability to hold on to the vocabulary and then to recall it when you need it. Pretty cool. So, to conclude, I think that the proof is in the pudding. That's an idiom that means the proof is there. I think language learners are realizing that listening to stories in English, telling their own stories, it's definitely helping them. And if you're not into storytelling, another way you could utilize stories is by listening to audiobooks or podcasts like mine. It significantly improves your comprehension skills. Also, just hearing the rhythm and intonation of native speakers can really help you to internalize those language patterns. So, even if storytelling is not your thing, you can still utilize listening to stories or listening to native speakers. So, to wrap up, storytelling is a powerful way to enhance your English learning experience. It makes learning more memorable, more enjoyable. And I really encourage you to try these techniques for yourself and see how they work for you. As always, if you have any stories or experiences that about storytelling in your language journey, I would love to hear them. If you have any suggestions for future episodes, you can always comment on Spotify, comment on YouTube. And thank you guys so much for listening or watching. And until next time, happy storytelling. Bye.